You poor simpleton. Did you really think you could save them? I will admit, I am surprised. One of our own blood, crawling through the mud and living among these feather filth. These crow spawn. You traded legacy for vermin. And for want. Look around you. Bask in their screams. Inhale the smell from their charred bodies. This is all because of you. Even as you cradle that corpse in your arms, you know it's true. Death was too good for her. She dared to defile my face with her filthy talons. For that sin alone, rotting in oblivion would have been mercy. But that is the most I would ever expect from some worm-eating poultry. One desperate squawk before inevitability corrected her. And you couldn't even save her. Our gods are stirring. The reckoning comes, not as ruin, but as cleansing. The unworthy will burn, and the world will kneel purified. We are no monsters, oh no. We are instruments, heralds of the coming flame. And you are not chosen. You are not feared. You are not remembered. You are a nobody.
Bro, shut your dick ass up.
Our story continues with tension thick in the air. The Ashbound found themselves surrounded by silent, robed cultists, their formation unbroken. At their head stood the scarred elf, the claw mark across his face stark against his composed expression, his gaze lingering on Adinyar, dressed in the garb of the Triseldarine ascendancy. The leader offered polite thanks, believing Adinyar to be a fellow cultist who had successfully obtained the orb. Yet suspicion laced his tone. Why was he traveling beside such unorthodox beings, a fire-blooded Goliath, an orc warrior, and a Kenku druid? And why did his attire belong to a different division? Where was his superior? Adinyar opened his mouth to respond, but Firenze did not allow it. With a soft slap and a firm hand over Adinyar's mouth, he declared him their prisoner. The scarred elf grinned. He claimed to love a bargaining game and asked their terms. Firenze, momentarily unsure, reached out telepathically to Poe. What were their demands? The mental silence that followed felt suspiciously like, Poe is typing. Annoyed, Firenze threw the question back to the leader. After all, he had brought the parade. The elf chuckled. Their demand was simple. They would take the orb. The Ashbound could keep their prisoner. Without further words, Firenze signaled Poe. Vines and barbed thorns erupted from the earth, ensnaring the leader and several cultists. In the same breath, Firenze crushed a magical flask in his palm. A roaring tidal surge of arcane force exploded outward, slamming into the cultists and hurling them violently to the ground. With that, the battle began. Firenze and Poe unleashed spell after spell. Krusk tore into the fray with steel and brute strength. Adinyar moved fluidly between martial forms, dismantling opponents with precise strikes, one of which Adinyar couldn't help but cop a quick squeeze of her rather ample breasts. Then the cultists raised their arms. Pale white flames flickered into existence in their palms. Their leader's voice rose above the chaos.
All will kneel to our god, Illyrian, the pale flame. His light will dominate your weak minds to serve our lord. Revere in his light as it commands you.
The flames shot outward. They struck Krusk. The world vanished for him. He felt himself falling into a white void, hazy, distant, watching his own body move without command. He could see his allies. He could hear the clash of steel. But he was a prisoner inside himself, and his body turned. Krusk then began to attack the Ashbound. Firenze's wild magic flared violently, ripping through cultists with destructive precision. Yet the battlefield was no longer simple. Krusk fought with full strength, and the cult leader continued screaming fanatical praise of Illyrian, the pale flame, much to the growing irritation of the Ashbound. The pale flame struck again, this time striking Poe. Poe staggered as the white fire seized his mind. For a moment, he too teetered on the brink of enslavement. Yet with a surge of will, he fought back against the invading force and forced it from his thoughts. However, the leader noticed this and swiftly acted. Together with the mind-controlled Krusk, he struck Poe directly, the brutal assault leaving him gravely wounded. But Poe endured. He cast Moonbeam toward the cultist, sustaining the pale flames. Yet the spell fell just short. The flame wielder still stood. Desperate, Poe transformed into a black bear, regaining strength and narrowly evading the combined assaults of Krusk and the scarred leader. Adinyar lunged at the cultist leader, only to be seized. In the struggle, his robe tore free. The leader froze. His eyes widened.
I remember you.
He said.
The Kenku village.
That moment of recognition, that flicker of memory, cost him. Seizing the moment of distraction, Adinyar broke free and retreated. Across the battlefield, Ferenczi felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. Krusk had turned. Poe had nearly fallen. Adinyar remained. Adinyar. And still one cultist stood conjuring pale flames. Ferenczi looked at Poe with exhausted disappointment. You had one job, man, he said tiredly, the frustration in his voice dulled by exhaustion. He then held a flask. It struck the cultist's head and detonated, killing him instantly. But from hiding, another cultist emerged and reignited the pale flames, striking Krusk again to reinforce the mind control. Ferenczi turned toward the wounded leader. Illyrian the Pale Flame, huh? He said coldly. Look at me. You've met the only real flame. A sorcerous burst spiraled from his hand. Mid-flight, the magic forked, one branch obliterating the final pale flame wielder, the other slamming into the cult leader. With their magic broken, Krusk collapsed, freed from their control. Silence almost followed, but not quite. The cult leader still lived, paralyzed, broken, yet breathing.
Illyrian, the Pale Flame, will scour this world,
he whispered.
His white fire will burn brighter than any wild spark you conjure. It will consume you, Goliath, and from the ashes of you all, blasphemers before the Pale Flame, and this fractured world you have corrupted, he will purify creation and begin again.
The Pale Flame is no flame compared to me, Ferenczi said. Think on that. He cast Mind Sliver. The leader's skull ruptured, and yet he lived. Adinyar proceeded to desecrate him, relieving himself on the fallen leader in crude contempt. Poe, in bear form, crushed his skull beneath massive paws. Yet somehow the leader still lived. Only then did they notice the necklace around his neck, identical to the one worn by the cult leader they had slain in the caves before. Understanding dawned as they realized the necklace sustained him. They tore it from him, and his life left him instantly. The battlefield fell silent. Then the orb they had been given from Maria began to hum. As it activated, 3 visions unfolded before them. A black kobold, one both Krusk and Ferenczi recognized, begging before an Emberian noble surrounded by armored guards. Next, a scarred leader seated upon an iron throne, grinning, gold and jewels heaped around him, 2 decapitated heads serving as armrests. And finally, a woman seated quietly by a fire in the woods. Aurora lights shimmered across the sky. Snow-capped mountains loomed behind her. The future had begun to reveal itself.